What's up, guys? Welcome to Get Skilled. This is going to be coding an app. Today we are going to be building a quote machine from FreeCodeCamp. This is the assignment right here, and if we click on this link right here, it's going to take us to this. Notice that passes 12 out of 12 tests, and if we click new quote, it loads a new quote, changes the color, and if we click tweet, it allows us to tweet out the quote. Beautiful, right? This is what I ended up building. You can see it's very similar, and it has the same tweet functionality with a new quote, and it loads a new color. Very nice, right? I'm going to be walking you through exactly how to build this today using React and SASS. It's going to be a fantastic introduction project. It allows you to add a quick line to your resume, show something on your Github page, and although it might not get you the job because it's such a basic app, it is a starting point that shows you the basics of how to take an idea to a published web app project. That's right, we're going to be deploying this to the web. This is a full-on URL. Anyone can go to this, and they can use our quote machine and your quote machine as well. As far as what background you need for this, you should know a little bit of JavaScript. If you don't, that's okay. I'm going to be going slow and explain things, but you do not need to know any React. This is a fantastic introduction to React. So let's go ahead and break things down. If you need to skip to any parts in the video, check out the link timestamps in the description. And with that said, let's get into it. So first things first, when we start any new project, is to think about what the requirements are going to be. Now, FreeCodeCamp gives us a few of the requirements. First of all, we need to fulfill the below user stories and get all the tests to pass, and then we can use any mix of these technologies to do so. These are the user stories, and we'll be walking through them one at a time, making sure that we get each one of them knocked down. But if we take a look at the machine itself, we can see that essentially we're going to need a background. We're going to need a box in the center with some text being displayed, the author, a new quote button, the tweet button, and then when we click new quote, it's going to need to change the quote and everything else is going to be randomized. So this is going to be a great introduction. Now let's get into how to actually start coding this. For this, we're going to need two things. We're going to need VS Code, and we're also going to need Node. So VS Code is just a studio editor or a code editor. You can use anything that you want from this. Visual Studio Code, just down here. It's available for Windows, Mac, and Linux. It is fantastic. Everyone on YouTube uses it. I recommend it. Nothing wrong with it. Download and install that. And then we also need Node installed, which you can just type Node into any search engine, go to the top link, node.js.org, and download either one of these. I have 14.7.0 in. Does not make a difference. Once you have that installed, you're going to be open up with a sheet like this. You're probably going to want to go to File, and then open Folder, and you're going to open whatever folder you want. I'm in my front-end libraries project. And now we're going to be creating our React app. So that was the essential setup. I know it was a little bit fast, but I'm assuming that you guys have used a computer before and can get that done. Now what we're going to do is create this boilerplate code. Boilerplate code is just basic code that gets a lot of the setup out of the way that we'd have to do every single time that we create an app. We're going to be going into our folder, and we're going to be typing npx for node package executable, and we're going to be doing create React app with hyphens in between. This is a project that Facebook creates to make it so it's easy to develop a React project. Now we're going to put quotes around this, and we're going to type in our title. So I'm going to call this Get Skill. We can't have any spaces or capital letters, I believe, in this. Get Skill quote machine. And we run that, and then we sit back and relax and let the computer work. So while this is installing, let me go ahead and describe what React is. React is a JavaScript library that's built by Facebook. A library is just like a library of books. It's something that you can pull functions off of, and it allows you to, do like a research project, or in this case, build an app. And what we're going to be doing with React is controlling what's being displayed on the page with JavaScript on the back end. It allows us to use something called declarative component-based architecture, which sounds very fancy, but essentially it says a lot of the imperative steps that where we have to say, do this, do this, do this, is all taken care of for us, and we don't need to worry about anything. We just say, hey, display this, and it'll do it. And React will manage all of that for us. And then it also gives us a component-based architecture, which means that we can break our functionality into smaller chunks and then tie those chunks together rather than having to do things in one big massive file and remember where everything is. It keeps things organized, and I think as you're going to see that it allows you to go to any project with the same architecture and quickly understand what's going on, and if you need to change a specific piece of it, find out where that is and make that change. You also get incredible performance because you're creating a virtual representation of your web page in memory, and then you're just changing the memory rather than having to recompute what that page looks like each time. That's the performance advantage, and React manages all of this for us in a nice, convenient package. So that took about 3 minutes to install. But now that we have it installed, you're going to see that you have another terminal window right here, and we suggest that you begin by typing cd get skill quote machine npm start. So cd get, and here's a little pro tip: if you can just hit tab and it'll try to autocomplete it for you. And then we hit enter, and then we can click npm start. This starts up our development server, and you're going to notice that it's going to open up a new web page, default localhost 3000, and it's going to show you what this looks like. So this is what we created. This is what Create React App, it creates every single time that you run it, no matter what you do. This is always what you get at the start. What we're going to do is I'm going to put this over here, and I'm going to open up our get skill quote machine, and we're going to, so I'm in this folder, and we're going to click on our source, and we're going to click on our app.js. So this is our app.js. This is where we have our div, our header with app header. Notice that it says p edit code, source app.js, and save to reload. And that's exactly where we're in source app.js and save to reload. So let's go ahead and just change this and say hello world. And if we save this, notice this, it automatically reloads, and this is hello world now. And you should notice that this looks a lot like HTML. If we click on an actual HTML document, like for example, here's a Wikipedia page. So if I highlight this, you can see that it represents different parts of the web page right here. Here's the content. You can see I'm highlighting over it. And oh, there's the body content. And I click on this. We get all these divs. And here's from Wikipedia, the free encyclopedia. And that's where that text is represented. In JavaScript, it's represented in this JSX right here. So let's go ahead and zoom this out. Get rid of this logo. Get rid of Learn React. We don't need that either. So the Learn React is this A tag, everything from here to here. And we can just delete that, and watch if we save this, that just deletes, no problem there. And we also don't need this image anymore because we don't really care about the React logo. We want our own stuff. So we can get rid of that, and we save this. Now we just have it say hello world. Not bad, right? Simple as that. Also, we don't need to import the logo anymore because we're not using the logo, so we can delete that. And now we're all set here. Next, we don't need this logo SVG anymore because we aren't importing that, so we can delete this. And we can go to our README, and why don't we go ahead and zero this out as well. I always like starting off with changing the README, and we're going to say this is a random quote machine for FreeCodeCamp.com's. Let me go ahead and make this a little bit bigger. All right, so I'm over here now. Com's front end library certification. And we're going to just paste in our little link right there. And there we go. Now we can save that. That's exactly what we need to know. Cool. So we've got the README all taken care of. We got the app.js. Now I want to install a little bit of a few things that I like to work with. So we're going to open up a new terminal window. I just click this little plus right here, and we're going to make sure that we're in our right directory. Notice that it says get skill quote machine, and I'm in the master branch. That's what this blue text is. And now I want to install SASS. So if I just do npm install node SASS with a hyphen between it, this is just a project that I've got memorized and I've installed it so many times. What it allows us to do is it allows us to change this from app.css to rename this to app.scss. Doesn't seem like it changes much. In fact, actually, if I was to change this, it's going to break right now because I'm not importing it. If I just change that import, notice that nothing actually changes. And me changing to SCSS didn't actually change anything. What SCSS is that it allows us, it's sassy CSS. It gives us a few extra features, like saying rather than having the app logo as a separate thing, we could actually nest this inside of it, which would normally break CSS. So we could do it like this and it would still work. But actually we don't need the app logo. So we also don't need this media query. We can delete that. We can also get rid of the, we'll keep the, let's see. We'll keep the app header for right now because this is actually a zeroed out centered. Notice that it has, it uses display flex, and then it has a line item center, justify content center to center everything. And then it's got the color and the app link color white. We don't need that because we don't need any links right there. We also don't need to have the animation, which is this for the logo to spin. So now we've just got text align center app. We have a background color right here. And then we've also got the min, all this other stuff. Very cool, right? Very cool. And because we just installed Node SASS, Create React App is already set up with SASS from the beginning. So we can just go ahead and paste in our app header to the app. Now, let's go ahead and talk for a second just about what React is actually doing. So what it does is we have a public folder right here, this index.html, and we can see that there is nothing in this besides this div, a blank div, which is a divider. It's just a box and on page with the ID of root, and there's nothing in it. And you can see that they say it's a template. If you open it, you'll see nothing on the page, which is fine. Instead, we have this index.js, and this is what's built by React. And notice that it says, find this document. So this is React DOM, and we're going to be rendering something. And it's going to go to get this document, and we're going to find this element that we just saw with the root ID. And we're going to be rendering out this app. And then React will render out that app for us. So it goes to app from app.js right here, and it renders out whatever is displayed right here. And it uses a language called JSX to do so. JSX is JavaScript that's designed to look like HTML, so it's easy to understand what we're actually rendering. So we're rendering a div here with a header inside of that, and a paragraph tag. What it actually looks like in memory is slightly different. It represents things as an object, but you don't need to understand that. Just understand that this is essentially what's going to be rendered right here. I think that you'll get a feel of it as we go through it. So now we've got our project set up. Let's go ahead and start breaking down our quote machine into things that we can actually code. We've got hello world to display on the page, but we would need a quote to display on the page. Let's see if we can get that to happen first. So if we just copy this quote, life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. I just paste that in. I save this. If we go back to a React server, notice that it updates. That's great. Well, what happens if I want to set this as a variable? So I actually want to be able to say something like, let quote equal a string with that text. And then I say right here, please render out quote. Now if I do this, it just renders out quote. So it's saying quote now, but what happens if we wanted to display this quote? Well, this is why we use JSX and React, because what we can do is we can say, hey, I don't want you to actually display the word quote. I want you to display the variable quote. And all we do is we just wrap this in curly brackets right here. Boom. And if we save this, notice this. It says life is 10% what happens to me and 90% how I react to it. Isn't that beautiful? Now let's also go ahead and add another tag right here. And I'll let you go ahead and figure out how to do that for a second. If you want to pause the video right now, great time to do it. Figure out how to add an author to our app. So this is how you'd add an author in the same way. Let's go ahead and say, let author equal whatever string we want. In this case, it's going to be Charles Swindle. And we actually don't need to have the hyphen there because we're going to have a hyphen for everyone. So what I'll do is I'll just have another little p tag. And then I'll have this render author. And we format this. There we go. And if I then, and all I need to do if I want to add the hyphen in front of it, I just use space tab like that, and it's going to render out the hyphen, a space, and then whatever the author variable is. So I save this, and notice this, we have life is 10% what happens to me, 90% how I react to it by Charles Swindle. Doing great so far. In fact, we can just wrap our quote in quotes like this, and we can, there we go. Look at that. Essentially, we're done, right? We have a quote displaying, but the thing is that there's no way to change it after the page is loaded. Instead, it just statically renders this. No matter how many times we refresh or what we do to the page, there's no way to change that unless we go into the quote. There's certainly no button. Ideally, we want a button to say, hey, give me a new quote. Well, rather than saying give us a random quote, why don't we just have it give us a new quote? How can we get it to change? How can we create a button that changes quote and author and then has our app update itself? So we can do this with something called state. State is just going to be whatever the text of the quote is and the state of whatever the author is. And that's all state is. It's just saying, hey, we have a certain variable and it could be represented in many different ways, but whatever it is right now, that's what the state is. And the way that we can control that is going to be something called use state. So if we just go ahead and go up to our import statement right here, we put a comment after React, and we put these curly braces around. We can click use state. And this allows us to import something in use state, which allows us to change this dynamically, and React will monitor that change and then update our app for us. So let me go ahead and show you what the format for state is. We have use state, and this is the format right here. So we have the state and a set state function, and then we use state and we set our initial state right here. Now, this use state function right here is what we just imported up here, and it does all the hard work for us. What it's going to do is it's going to give us back our variable, just like quote right here. So I'm going to type in quote right here, and then this is going to be a function that sets the quote. So we have quote and set quote. So if we want to change this, we just call this and we pass in whatever text we want to change it. And then we're going to initialize it with our text right here, okay? Boom. And now, if I just delete that, I don't change anything else, I save this again, we're going to see no changes. See? Nothing. But let's say I change this to work is temporary referencing 90% of how I react to it. Notice that. So it's whatever I put right here, that's what's being rendered right there. It's the default thing. It seems like we didn't do anything, but we got access to this beautiful, beautiful set quote function. So now what we can do is let's go ahead and create a button right here at the bottom of the page. We'll just create a little button. And I want this button to change what the quote is displaying. And what we're going to do is we're going to say change quote. Okay. We're going to do this through an on-click handler. So when we click the button, we say on-click. When I click you, we're going to run some sort of JavaScript. That's what this equals, this curly bracket right here. We're going to say set quote to be, and we'll grab a new quote from our website right here. So let's go and grab a new quote right here, and let's go ahead and paste this in. We've just passed this in as some text. And now we have, if we go to our app, we have, so too many re-renders. React limits the number of renders to prevent an infinite loop. This seems like, wait, what did we do wrong? We just passed in the set quote thing, and suddenly it's breaking 24 frames per clack. Render with hook, so it's something wrong with our hook right here. We're doing set quote, What's happening, and this is a very common error, is React is going to be executing this because we passed in an argument. So what happens is that it renders this button and it says, oh, I see that you want me to execute this function. Let me go ahead and do that. And it changes this, and then it says, okay, let me go ahead and re-render the page, and then it's going to re-render that. It's a simple enough change. What we're going to be doing is saying this as an anonymous function to execute this when we click on it. That's all. We just put two parentheses, an arrow function. So we say, this is a function that we want to be executed. Don't render this, don't execute this right away. We refresh this. Notice, renders just fine. If I click change a quote, boom. The question isn't going to let me, but who's going to stop me? I click that again, it doesn't change it again. Because it just changed it to, the question isn't going to let me, it's going to be who's going to stop me. Now if I go here to our React developer apps, click on our app, you can see state right here. The question isn't going to let me, it's going to, who's going to stop me? Let me go ahead and refresh the page again and show you this. So the state work is 10% what happened to me, 9% how I react to it. Click change quote. And we executed this set quote function to pass in this new text. So it set this equal to the quote variable. React detected that change for us, re-rendered the quote, re-rendered the page with this, and notice that the data is in line with what's being displayed on the page. That's React magic. In a normal imperative way to program, like in jQuery, for example, or old school programming, what you would do is you would have to change this variable. Then you would have to select this element on the page, say, I want you to re-render it yourself with this new quote variable. So it's several different steps, and we say that we want that to happen every time that we click this button. But React is smarter than that, and it says, you know what? All you need to do is just tell me that this P element has whatever the quote text is, and I'll make sure it's always up to date. As long as you're by my rules, by my conventions, it's going to always be up to date. And that's called declarative rendering. Rather than having to explicitly say, hey, update this variable, then update the element, and then display that on the page, instead we can say, you know what? Just tell me that this element always has the text of this variable, and I will make sure that it's up to date. It's a lot simpler and a lot easier to manage. We just say, I want the text to be this, and then the element updates itself. Isn't that cool? So now the challenge, if you want to pause the video and test it yourself, is can you do the same thing with the author? So you have a button that changes not just the quote right here, but also changes the author to Ayn Rand. First of all, we're going to be using useState, which is going to be const, and we're going to do a bracket there, which is going to destructure off this useState function when we get back these two things, this variable and the set quote. And we're going to be getting our author and our set author function. And this is going to equal useState. And we're going to pass in our initial author, which is Charles Swindoll. Boom. Oh, failed to compile because we're defining author twice. So that's why it's throwing an error. We just delete that, save this. Notice it renders, no problem. Now let's say I want this to change that. How would we get it so if I press the same button, it does that? Because we could just create a new button. We could just do this. And I say, hey, change author, set author to be, change like that, boom. And notice we gotta change quote button and then change author button. And it updates that just fine. But what happens if we want it to be the same thing? Well, all we need to do, now we need to have a multi-line return because we're gonna be executing multiple lines of code. So we can wrap this in a, paste that in, set author to Ayn Rand, set the quote, and then we set the author, and then we return that, and we don't need this other button here anymore. Save this, and now I click this, both of them update, just like that. We set the quote, and then we set the author. Now, we're going to be probably doing this a lot. We're going to be having the set quote, set author function because we're going to be changing each time. So why don't we create our own function for this? And why don't we we'll have this be, we'll say change, we'll call this change quote and author. And we'll create a new function right here. So it's going to be an arrow function. We'll say const equals, we'll take in, so const change quote and author. There we go. Had a little typo there. And what we're going to do is we'll just paste in our set quote, set author functions right there. Boom. Save this. And now if we just execute our function as change quote and author, execute that. Notice that we press it again, nothing changes, but our functionality is right there. And now if we want to change this, it's just separate out so it's not in the middle of our function right there. So now we have a button to update it once, but the full quote machine has it updating it multiple times. We get a new quote each single time that we do this. Well, we've got this button right here. Let's go ahead and draw this to change quote 2, okay? Because we have a first quote, a second quote, and why don't we could have another button, and we could say, hey, change this to quote 3, right? We'll call this change author quote author 2, and we'll copy this down, and we can just go ahead and say, hey, change quote and author 3, and we go grab a new quote, and we can just copy and paste this in. Grab a new quote, either write something worth reading or do something worth writing. Love it. And then we get Benjamin Franklin. He said that apparently, and paste that in. Call this change quote and author 3. Save this, and notice if we change this to quote 2, quote 3, we're all set. And maybe we want to make it so it goes back to the original. What we could do is we could just copy this again. Notice we're doing a lot of copy and pasting though. We could say, hey, I want to have it be quote and author. We'll just call this quote and author 0. We'll call this quote and author 1 because computers always count from 0, and call this quote and author 2. This is our initial state, and we'll say, hey, copy paste, boom, copy paste, boom. Save this. Oh, what did we miss? Quote and author. Oh, we don't have 3 anymore because now this is 2. This is 1, and now we need another button for our quote 0. Right there, quote author 0. Now we render this and look at this. We click change quote 0, doesn't change anything, but we click 1, loads new quote, 2, new quote. Sweet, so now we can change between them. And if we just gave our users like a random number at the top and said, hey, generate a new random number, and then they clicked on whichever quote that was, they would technically get a random quote each time and we'd be done with our project, right? Well, not quite, but the functionality would be there. So let's go ahead and get it to display a random number on the page. I want a random number to display right here. I want it to say, let's go ahead and this be H1, and I want this to be a random number. And then we're going to have it render out a random number. right here. And we haven't just said what the random number is going to be, but it's going to be managed the same way that we have been from the beginning. We can go ahead and do this through const a random number, set random number, and then it's going to be use state. And we'll just initialize this as 0 because we want it to be a number. Okay? So now we'll create a function that generates a random number and we'll have it display that. So let's just go ahead and make sure that displays that, refresh this page. Random number is 0. So I click 0, there we go. And now I need another button below that that says, hey, generate a new random number. Generate a number, and I have this on click, and I say, hey, when I do this, I want you to execute this function that says set random number to be, and this is just a JavaScript function that you should know, math.random, and it just says, and that just gives us a random number right there. Boom. So let's see what happens if we do this now. So I save this, I've got a button, generate a random number, and it does give us a random number, but we've got a problem right now. Notice that it always is 0.9, it's always 0 point something. It's never like 1, 2, or 0, 1, or 2. Like we want it to be an integer each time, and we want it to be between 0, 1, and 2. This number right here actually is between 0, including 0, it can generate 0, all the way up to, but not including 1. So it goes from 0 to 0.9999999, all the way out repeating. And no matter how many times I press this, I'm never going to get anything other than one of those numbers. So how do we get this to be a random number? Well, let's go ahead and pull this functionality out of this right here. And we'll have this be a generate random number function. And we'll go ahead and write this up here. We haven't written this yet, but it's going to be const generate random number. And it's going to be an arrow function, which is going to take in nothing, and it's going to return out a generate random number. So it's going to be math.random, return this. And I always like to start off just by, if we're going to move stuff around, just make sure don't change anything at first. Save it, random number, generate random number. Does this still work? Why does it not work? Return random number. The reason why is because we aren't setting the random number at any point. So what we need to do is actually not return the random number, we need to set random number. Now we save this, click that, everything still works just the same as it did before. Sweet. So how do we get this? So given what I just said, is there a way that you can turn this random number between 0 and 0.999 to 0 to 3? Go ahead and figure it out if you want to try to. I'm going to tell you the answer in 3, 2, 1. What we're going to do is we're going to multiply it by the number of quotes that we have, or in this case, it's going to be, we want 0 to 2, right? So we're going to be multiplying it by 3, because there are 3 numbers we got. We can get 0, 1, or 2. And if we do this now, let's go ahead and save this. 1.86, 0.3, 2.2. So we're getting 0, 1, or 2 just fine, but I don't want this decimal at the end. So all I can do is I can do math.floor, which is going to get rid of the decimal at the end and just take the integer, just round down always. And I save this, and now I get 0, 1, or 2. And look at this. Now I say, oh, quote 1. Random again. Oh, I get quote 1 again. Random number 2. Now I get quote 2. There we go. Now, we're coders though. We are programmers, and we can go ahead and set the computer to do all this for us. So the user doesn't have to click generate random number and then click quote 1. Instead, we can say, hey, generate a random number for me, and then you display that quote. So how can we get that to happen? Well, let's go ahead and we have set a random number, and that's still great, but let's take this, what we're setting this to, and let's set this to a variable just so we can reuse it later. That way we can pass this around. So we have a 1, we can say get quote 1. So let random, we'll call it rand. We don't want to call it random number because we had to use that. Let's call it rand equals math.floor, just what we just passed in, and then we'll set that equal to random integer. Call it random integer, save that, and then I notice it clicks, still works. And now what we can do is we can say, hey, I want you to execute change quote author 0, change quote author 1, 2, or that I want you to either execute change quote author 0, change quote and author 1, or change quote and author 2, depending on that. Well, there isn't actually a very convenient way to do this. We can do this. Let me show you how to do this if we were to use this if statement. So it's like if random integer is equal to 0, then I want you to execute, then execute change quote author 0. And then if we just copy this and paste this a few times, 1, 1, 2, 2. I save this. Oh. Nope. So we just execute these functions right there. That's that. So expect it. So an expression is just this. It's just saying, hey, this thing is expressed. Instead, we want to be calling a function. And that's what we do with these. We invoke it with these parentheses right here. Save this. And now notice this. If I click generate a number, there we go. And it gave us 0 like 3 times in a row. There aren't too many here. Random number 2, either something's worth reading or something that's worth writing. Notice that that is quote 2. If we scroll down to quote 2, it's right there. Boom. And it changes it for us. So we're doing great. We essentially built out our full random quote machine at this point. And now we actually don't need these buttons anymore because it's automatically changing it for us. We can get rid of that. But we've got this really ugly format right now where every time that we want to add a new quote, we've got to do this. We've got to create a new function, label it, quote author 0, and then do this. It's not very convenient. But what if we wanted to not have to make a new function each time we want to set a new quote and then have to make this little if statement? And it's just this really big pain. We have to change like 3 pieces of code every single time we want to add a new quote. And when really it should just be copy, paste the quote in, and the machine just works with it, right? Well, we've had a few things. We got this 3, so we only can have 3 quotes right here because we can only generate a number that's 0, 1, or 2. And then we also have to have this function each time, and it has to correspond to that. So let's go ahead and figure out how to break this up. Now, the way that I would break this up is like this. I'm sure there's other ways to do it, but I would create an array. So let's go ahead and call this quotes. And I'm going to create an array, which is just an ordered structure of data in memory. And we're going to just copy and paste in the quote. So a string right here, boom, paste that in. That's our first element, which is our 0th element. And then we have our set quote to be right here, boom, quote. And the question is who's going to stop me? There we go, that's 2. And now I grab this. Beautiful. Now, let's go ahead and get this to work, okay? So now if we do this, rather than saying, hey, change quote and author, what if we were to just say, hey, you know what? Why don't we just change quote? Or why don't we just say set quote, which is our state quote right there. So it's set the quote to be, I want you to set the quote to be quotes, and this is how we access it, quotes of the 0th index, okay? And then we set quote to be, we just copy this in, and rather than 0, I want it to be the first index right there. Notice the brackets. And now 2, save this, and everything should still work the same. Ooh, cannot read property 0 of undefined. Oh, quotes, not quote. Ah, there we go. Simple thing. So I was accessing the first index of quote, and then it was resetting that to be the state each time. That's why it was a weird bug. We'll call this quotes array to be very clear. Boom. And now everything should still work. And look at that. See, it's still working just fine. But we also want the author to change this too. Notice that when we did that, we kind of got rid of the author functionality because we were saying the author each time. And notice that when we did the quote and the author were paired. And here it's just the quotes. Now we could create a separate, we could just duplicate this and create a author array. And we could do it like this. But then like we have like a bunch of text. Imagine if we had hundreds of them and we were off by one at some point. Everything would be shifting. We'd never get the right quote. Instead, it wouldn't be nice to represent our data in a way that these things are linked. The quotes and the authors are linked. Well, how I would do this is I would go ahead and make each one of these an object literal. An object is a key value pair. So in this case, what you do is you wrap this in curly brackets. I know curly brackets are used for a lot. In this case, they're used as objects. And actually down here, these are objects as well, but they allow us to run JavaScript functionally. Here, they allow us to just assign a key value pair. It's the exact same thing actually, but it's just used very creatively by React under the hood. So key value pair. So we have a quote right here that's like this, and then we have an author. We put a comma author, and then this author is going to just be Charles Swindoll, right? This. So let's go ahead and you just trust me for a second that this works, okay? So now I don't need this anymore. And then I can take Ayn Rand and I can do this. In fact, let's just go ahead and copy this data structure. Copy this and we'll just paste that right there. And now we'll copy and paste this. Copy, place that text, and then Ayn Rand, and Ben Franklin wrote that, boom. I'll keep this here just so you can see it in a second. So now if we were to try this again, it's gonna break because we aren't accessing things in the right way anymore. Instead, it's gonna be displaying this object because this object is the first item. This is what it's saying, access the first item of the quotes array. So it's gonna display the quotes array as this object, which is not going to work. Notice it breaks. See, it breaks. So we need to change how we're accessing it. So we're going to be accessing that first thing, but now we're going to be accessing the quote of that. Set the quote there, and we just do this for set quote. That quote. And now it works just fine because we're accessing the quote. And if we wanted to say set author, how do you think we would do this? Well, we take our quotes array, we pass this in, and rather than accessing the quote, we'd be accessing the .author property. So this is the quote property, which corresponds to this string right here, and the author corresponds to this string. This is the key, the quote is the key, and the value is this text right here. This author is the key, and the actual author's name is the value. So we have these key value pairs that are represented. That's all an object is. But the value can be anything. It can be another function, it can be another object. That's where it gets complicated. In this case, it's just text. So we've got this, and we can go ahead and just copy and paste this. Boom. We just grab the first one, and notice you might have noticed something right here. That it's updated now, working just fine, working great, in fact. And we've done a great job. We've moved from, hey, having these individual functions, so we've got to write a new function each single time that we want a new quote with a set quote set author, to now we just copy paste our quote in the special data structure right here, and then it updates it. But notice that I'm typing zeros and ones a lot. And if you've been paying attention, what we're actually doing is we're taking, say, whatever the random integer is, I want that index of it. If it's 1, I want the first one. If it's 2 is that. That's the beauty of this data structure. Because now what we can do is we can do this. We can set quote to be, we can actually just take this to be the random integer. And then we can just copy this. And we can set this to be the random integer. And then we don't need any of these statements, and we can add as many as we want now, and we're all set. Save this. Look at that. It works just fine. A random quote machine is working perfectly. So let me go and recap what we've done so far, just so you can see it. What we have is we're setting our initial state. We have a quote and an author. We also have this random number just so you can see for demonstration purposes. And then what we have is we have a quotes array where which is an array, which is an ordered structure in memory, saying, hey, here's 1, 2, 3, and it just counts up like that, so that we can access it in ordered pair just by passing a number. And then each one of these is a object literal that is just literally an object, which is a key value pair of a quote with the quote itself and an author with that author. Now, this is actually working pretty well so far. And we could almost call ourselves done at this point because we do have to just generate a random number. And if we just simply said, rather than generate a random number, we just say generate a random quote, suddenly we're getting a random quote each time. Look at that. And I could just hide this, no problem. And look at this. We essentially have a random quote machine. No problem, right? Well, let's go ahead and try to add another quote and see what happens. So all we're going to do to add a new quote, see if you can figure out how to do this on your own before I do it. We paste in our data structure, grab the text of the new quote, paste this in, and then grab the name, paste that in. And we don't need the hyphen. Save this. And I want this new quote to display. Let's see it, okay? 2, 0, oh, wait, it's never actually showing up because we have this 3 right here. So what we need to do is instead we need to actually take in our array, our quotes array, and we need to set this to be the length of that array. So if we have 4, there are 4 items here. So if we just do quotes array dot length times math.random, just like that. And now it'll generate a random number between 0 and whatever the maximum number of items is. So it would be 0, 1, 2, or 3. Watch this. 3. Boom. What's money? A man's success if he gets up in the morning, goes to bed at night, and does in between does what he wants to do. So this is working just fine. And we actually don't need this to be generate a random number anymore. We probably could use a little bit more semantic name, and we can say get random quote. Boom. And we just change that. So now it's semantic. I just changed the name here and down here on our click. And we're pretty much done at this point. But here's the thing. I don't have a bunch of quotes. I don't really want to copy and paste a bunch of quotes in. Instead, I would really like it if I could just access, the same quote database that they're accessing, and then we could just pass that in, okay? Let's go ahead and see where they're getting their quotes from. So I change this view. I go to the editor view. This is an important skill, being able to look at another project and then be able to read the code of it. We go here. We can see that there's this get quotes function, which this is jQuery right here. If you see this $, immediately assume jQuery. And see that there's this URL right here. It says JSON. And let's go ahead and copy and paste this into a new tab. Just at get user hub content, camper bot, raw, quotes JSON. And look at this. It's just like our data structure. It is an array with object literals. Each one of them has a quote and an author. So this is a perfect data structure right here that we've just represented. And all we need to do at this point really is just figure out how to get all of these, 100 or so quotes in to our app. And then we would be all set, 101 quotes right here. So we definitely want this as a URL. So let's go ahead and paste this in. And we'll just say for right now, we'll just declare outside of this functional app, we'll say let quote DB database equal this string of quotes, okay? And now we have to figure out how to fetch it, okay? We have to get this JSON data in, and we have to parse it out into be this essential data structure. It has to be this quotes array that we want. So what we want to do is we want to grab this URL right here, and we want to tell our app that after you load, go to this URL, grab this data that's right here, and then parse it out so it looks like this and set it equal to this quotes array. Now, notice I said after the app loads. So if we're changing something after the app loads, we are immediately going to be using state. So what we're going to do is we're going to be using this use state format that we are used to, and we're going to be setting a quotes array. Setting this quotes array, I'm just going to have this be our quote array for right now. Let's go ahead. And we're going to set this equal to null at the start because we don't have any data. And then what we want to do is say that after the app loads, we're going to start. I want you to go out to this URL, grab the data there, and parse it. And for that, we need an asynchronous function. So this is going to be, and it's also going to be done in useEffect. So let's go over useEffect first. useEffect, we import it at the top, just like we did with state. And this allows us to run effects in our app after the app loads. it has an effect. If we return anything from this callback function right here, this will clean up. So if we, let's say we subscribe to some URL and say, hey, listen for changes, like we're listening to, like we're YouTube and we're listening to the view count on a video. And we're saying, hey, I want you to live render that, or Twitter, and we're doing the number of likes on a tweet. Like we can subscribe to the data stream on the server, and it'll constantly check it every once in a while for updates. But we aren't subscribing to anything, so we don't need a cleanup function right here. And the only thing it depends on is, and then this input is just, hey, what does this depend on? What does this change? So this is going to depend on this quote database URL right here. So if that changes, then I want you to re-render it. Otherwise, don't touch it, okay? So it's gonna run at once at the start, no matter what. And then if this URL ever changes, like we set state later, or we allow users to input their own JSON data, then it will re-render itself. So we're going to be fetching data, so we're going to need to do an async arrow function. So it's going to be const fetch quotes, and this is going to be an arrow function, so it's going to be async, and we're taking in our URL, which we are actually going to be passing in. This is going to be our quote DB URL. So taking the quote DB URL, and we're going to call this quote DB URL. How about we just call this URL for it? This will be fine. Yep. Quote DB URL, and then actually we don't need to take that. So taking that, and then I want you to execute this function, where what we have is it's going to be a await. So we're going to const response equals fetch with the, or we're going to await the successful fetch of this quote DB URL. And then what we're going to do is we're going to do then const parse equals so one thing to know with this is that this looks like it is the standard JSON data structure. Like it looks fine, but actually, if we view the source, so I've got an extension in here that parses out the JSON data for us. I open this up in Firefox, where I don't have that installed. You can see that it's not quite the same. It's very, very similar, but notice that there are 2 quotation marks around each one of the keys, because that's just how JSON has to work. It has to have the quotes there, and that keeps everything organized. But in JavaScript, if we have quotes around something, it is not a key anymore. Instead, it's going to change it to a string, and that's going to cause errors. So we need to parse it out with going to be response.json, and that's going to parse out the response, and then we're going to set our quotes array with this, we'll call this parsed JSON. So this quotes array is this parsed JSON, and now let's go ahead and just, we'll comment this out for right now, and let's see what happens when we do this. Let's see where we're going wrong. Well, cannot read property length of null. So fetch quotes as assigned value was never used. So we need to invoke it. So why don't we just go ahead and move this outside of this, and then we just call it whenever we want to. Fetch quotes, and then we just call fetch quotes URL, and we'll just change this to URLs, so we can just, it's generic, and then we'll just pass in our quote DB URL like this. See how that goes. Oh, we need to await this because we don't want the promise. We want to await the response of that. There we go. Look, now we've got the quotes, and we got 102 quotes right here. Beautiful, right? And now, if I click generate random quote, not a number. Cannot read property quote of undefined. Let's see what we did wrong. So we might have the wrong, it's .quote and author. So it should be just fine. It should work just fine. Quote. So quotes away, go to that random integer and grab the quote, which should be that. So let's go ahead and, obviously it's going to happen again. Not a number. Set quotes. Oh, here's what we, let's see. Set quotes array. First of all, set quotes array, use state null. Now let's go ahead and take a look at what the state is of this. So it's an object with quotes inside of it. So we'll do parse JSON. This is going to be just dot quotes like that. Boom. So that's the problem. So we were getting a object with quotes, and it had a key value pair of array. And now notice this, it's set to an actual array, like what we had before. So now it will work. Look at that. How's that for a random quote machine? Not bad, right? So that we don't need our quotes array anymore. And we've got everything working now. All we need to do is just work on the styling, the tweeting, and then we're pretty much done. So the functionality is working just fine. And this is where I'd probably start introducing the testing. So let me show you how to do that really quick. So the testing right here is going to be, you can use this content delivery network right here. So you just grab this bundle right here, and we're going to go to our index.html at the very bottom right here, right above the closing body tag. We're gonna add a script tag in, and then we'll close that script tag. And then our source is going to be this little bundle right here. Just paste this, and notice when we go back, we have the same testing machine that we had up here to run our tests. Now, we haven't added a lot of the functionality to it, so we're probably gonna fail a lot of the tests, but let's see what we fail first so we can start adding things to it as we go through it. Because we have our functionality down. We could technically call ourselves done at this point. Now we just need to make it so it passes these tests. Run tests. Well, we have 1 out of 10 passed, but it looks like we had a lot of passed for a second. See a wrapper element with corresponding ID quote box. Okay, so we need to add a wrapper element with a quote box. Easy enough. Let's go ahead and wrap all of this in a quote box. We're going to add it at the beginning. Let's go ahead and a div and move this line down there at the bottom, format that, and it needs an ID. So we're going to do ID equals quote box. And now let's see if we pass this test. Run tests. Oh, look, we passed 3 already. I can see a wrap. What test did we pass? Horizontally centered. Okay, so we're already horizontally centered, which is good. And we're using the technology stack, which is great. I can see the wrapper element with a corresponding ID of quote box. That's great. So now within quote box, I can see element with corresponding ID of text. So that's probably going to be our quote down here. So we'll just give this the ID of text. Now we should pass this. Ooh, look at that. We got the ID text. Now we need author. So we just go in and we add ID of author. Whoa, we jumped up there. 7 out of 12 pass. Okay, with the new quote box, I can see a clickable element with the corresponding ID. New quote. So let's go ahead. That's our button right here. And you know what? I do remember it being at the bottom. So let's go ahead and move it down to the bottom right here. And we'll go ahead and give this the ID of, we need this to be new quote, right? Something like that. Let's see, run the tests. So let's see, yep, so we have new quote, and now we need a tweet quote. So we haven't talked about the tweet quote yet, but the tweet quote is actually easier than you think. We can use URL parameters, and we can use JavaScript to dynamically update them with the quote. So we need a clickable A element. So we're going to create an A tag. We'll call this tweet quote. It's not going to look very pretty at the start because it's just going to have default styling, but we'll give it an ID of tweet quote. And make sure that this works. Should pass 11 out of 12 tests, and then we just need to get the tweeting running. There we go, passed 11 out of 12, we're good here. Displays a random quote, displays another one, and when the new button's clicked, it displays a new one. Okay, perfect. So the only thing we need to do is get the tweeting to work, and it's actually easier than you think. We already have the A tag in there, and now we need to do the href. Now it says that what we use is we use the twitter.com/intent tweet. So let's just go ahead and go to this URL and see what happens. So open a new tab, twitter.com intent tweet. Now it opens up a new Twitter box, but the thing is we can use URL parameters. So if I type up right here, I type a question mark, I hit text equals hello, like this. Notice that it says hello in the box now. We can get our app to dynamically render the tweet, and we can get the same functionality that they have, where if I press this button, it opens up a tweet with that already pre-filled out. So the href is going to equal, we're going to do a string interpolated value. It's going to be, so we're running JavaScript right here, and we're going to do this twitter.com/intent to tweet, and now we're going to have the parameter, and let's go ahead and just do it with text equals hello. So now if we go to our app right here, and I click tweet, it's going to open up a new, it's going to, you know why it didn't work? Because I didn't have an http://www.twitter.com. So now it actually will take me to that rather than adding it to the end of the URL like that. So I save that, go back, tweet quote. I have one too many W's here. Whoops, there we go. www. If I go back, there we go. Little errors. Now I click tweet quote. Opens up a new window. Perfect, with the word hello. Now how can we get it to display this quote? Well, we can use string interpolated values. So we use this $sign and then these brackets, and we can put our author right here. I'm putting author in here for a second because you're going to see it's going to break if I try to use the quote, and you'll understand why in a second. So if I do this, I'll have Charles Swindle as a text. Perfect, because this right here grabs our value for whatever our current state is, and then it just loads that in as the text. So, but the thing is, if we try to get the quote to display the same way, quote, we're going to notice that it breaks. So watch this. So I click tweet quote. This page isn't working. It's unable to handle this request. The reason why is actually because we have unsafe characters in here. We have these parentheses right here. And if you look at this URL, notice that it's parenthesis 20 is how it represents spaces. So we have 10%, %20, and it's going, I don't know what you mean. So we need to safely encode this. And we use something called the URI encoder. So we can take something like this, where there's a bunch of unsafe characters in here, and we can encode it, and it encodes it properly. You can see it. It's just as simple as running encode URI with whatever URL we want right there. So all we need to do on this is we just encode, because we can run JavaScript right here. This is the beauty of React. So we can just encode the URI right there, and it's going to automatically convert this to a safe URL, and then it's going to set that as a link. So we save this. It took me a few minutes to get that figured out, but save this, should work. There we go. Forgot to save it. There we go. So now we should be able to pass all the quotes, because when I press generate random tweet, it does so. And if I press tweet quote, it allows us to go over here, and it has the quote all tweeted up. So let's go ahead and run all the tests. And look, it passes just fine. So we've passed all the tests. Let's go ahead and add up a few functionalities. So we have this nice little background change, this blur white text, plus it's a Twitter button, not this ugly little tweet quote. Let's go ahead and work on the styling. We could just call it here. You've learned all this stuff, but now we can take advantage of some of the SASS styling that we've done before. So first things first, let's go ahead and grab this quote box right here. We go right here to the app, and we'll do the ID of quote box. And we'll set the background color to be white. Oh, that works just fine. And we'll also set the border radius to be 10 pixels. And then we'll have the color of the font be black for right now. There we go. Everything still works. One thing that I'm curious about is, does this change size? It does. So adjust that. Also, it has, looks like a block icon right here. So that's fine. Let's work on getting it so Helen Keller is aligned over. So we're going to use nesting again. We don't need the index HTML. We don't need that open anymore. So we just have the app right here. And we'll have the author, which is inside here. So we'll have this be hashtag author. Normally you use classes for all these, but we're just using IDs because we already added the ID. And we'll have the author, and we'll have this be align self to flex end. Text align, or we'll have this text align end. Right there, boom. Easy as that. And now, let's see, we want the tweet quote to actually come before that new button. So we just are going to cut this out and paste it above the button. And then we'll go ahead and put for this quote box, let's go ahead and align the, so I personally like doing things in like this is looking pretty good to me. I think that the only thing is that I would probably add in a little bit of padding to it. So we'll do padding. We'll do 25 pixels all the way around. See how that looks? That looks pretty good. And then let's go for the quote. Or, sorry, tweet. What was the name of this again? Tweet quote. Tweet quote, and we'll have this be align self start. I believe that's only for flex buttons. So we'll do float left like that. And we'll also have a little bit more padding. So we'll do padding left of, we'll have it be 5%. That looks pretty good. And then we'll have this generate random quote. We'll have that float right. So this is going to be button ID of new quote. New quote, float right, and there we go. And let's go ahead and change it. So the other thing we could add is background color. So I'm gonna just go ahead and get an array, material design colors, all the material design colors right here. This is just a big array of random colors, really big array of random colors. Copy and paste that, and then we'll just create a new little, we'll call this colors array.js, and we'll just paste that in like that, and then we will just at the bottom export default colors. Colors array. Easy as that. We'll call this colors array because it's a constant. And we'll export default that, save that, and then we're going to import this into our app right here at the top. Import colors array from colors array.js, and then we will go ahead and we will have a state set because we want to change the background color. So the goal is that we change both the color of the text, the button, all these elements in here, as well as the background color. So what we'll do is we'll set a little state here, and we'll const, we'll call it accent color. set accent color equals use state, and we'll have this be, that is this color right here. We'll just call that, copy that in, and we want it to be a like that. And let's go ahead and take a look at how our data is formatted. So it's all hash. Like that, perfect. So we've got that, and now what we want to do is we want to set it so the background color has this as its style. So we can actually do this in React right here. And the way that we do this is we say, I want the style to be this accent color. So what we'll do is we'll say, we'll change the everything here. So we'll have the style equal, we pass in object literal with an object as it, and we say now background color is going to equal accent color, like that. And then we also have color equals accent color. Let's go ahead and take a look at this. Oh, it's not equals, it is a colon because these are objects. Perfect. And now, if I say, we have this random integer that we're already generating. So if I just say set accent color to be colors array with that random integer, same the way we did before. And we'll see how that works, okay? Look at that. Not bad, right? Now what we need to do is we also need to set the, so we can take this style, background color, all this other stuff. We can copy and paste this into several different spots wherever we want to change the color. So for example, we want the author, we will have, the color should inherit itself down. So we won't change the background color here, but we will change the color right here. Get rid of that. There we go, look at that. So it changes that. Not bad. Now let's go ahead and go to our A tag, and we'll change the background color of, what we'll do is we'll put this in a div, or background color of this as well. And we'll try this as well. We'll change the color on this button of this generate random quote button, new quote. We'll call the color, make sure it's white. And then we'll also set border radius. So it has some rounded corners. We'll set this to be 5%, just like everything else. Or 10 pixels, I mean. Padding, 10 pixels. Very nice. And then we'll also have the border is none. There we go, that's looking pretty good to me. Let's see, do we have anything else here? And then we'll also have the cursor be a pointer when we mouse over it. All right, let's see. So now we have that tweet quote, and what we need to do is we're going to add a class name of here equals button, and we'll same. And let's go ahead and let's see. So this tweet quote, it's going to be in .button, and let's see. We're going to change the color to be white. Text decoration is none, so we don't have the underline. It's looking better already. And let's go ahead. Let's change it from padding left to be just do padding all around. 10 pixels. And let's see, this is looking pretty good. We'll add a border radius. 10 pixels. Probably could do this a little bit more efficiently with variables. Okay, so everything's looking good. We got the tweet quote button. I want to insert, the only thing I want to change before we move on and call this project pretty much done is I want to make it so this tweet quote has the Twitter icon rather than it just being a straight tweet quote. So for that, we're going to be using FontAwesome. So this is Editing Jake coming back at you, realizing that I did a pretty terrible job of explaining how I'm doing the styling and also what's going on with FontAwesome. So let me do a walkthrough of what the final project looks like so that way you can see it and also how to use FontAwesome really quick. So right here, we're at FontAwesome. You're going to get started for free. And what you're going to do is you're going to log in, you're going to do all that fun stuff. And then once you have that set up, we're going to be following along with the React guide. Now, what you want to do is you're going to want to install absolutely the core as well as the React FontAwesome. You do not need these solid icons, but we will be using them later. So I recommend just installing these first three and then also grabbing this brand icons later so we can get the Twitter logo. This has the Twitter logo in it. FontAwesome has so many logos, they break up into packs so the actual download size is smaller. Then what we're going to do is we're going to be following along with this. Essentially, all of our icons are going to look like this. We're going to be, everything already has React DOM in it. We don't need to worry about that. Instead, we're going to be worrying about these lines right here. And what we're going to be doing is we have import FontAwesome icon. So this is going to be just a custom component that FontAwesome generates for us. And then we import whatever logo we want. The way that we find this is by going up to the top here, searching for it. And let's say I want Twitter right here. And then it's going to search in Twitter. And I click on this. It's going to be, you can see it's FA Twitter. And that's exactly what you would type in for that result right there. So instead of FA Coffee, you'd write FA Twitter, and then you type in the, this I do a pretty good showing here, but you're going to be typing the FontAwesome icon, and then the icon you're just going to set to FA Twitter, or the quote as we're going to use later. FontAwesome.com right here, and you just go here, and you can get started for free. Create your first kit. Now I've already done this. I already have an account. So I'm all logged in now. And next, we're going to go to React, and we just can follow along with the guide from this. So first of all, we're going to be installing it with npm. So we just go here, npm install, save. So all we need to do is just need to copy this core, the React FontAwesome, and then we want the brand right here. So we just run those three commands, and now we scroll up to the top, and we can see that I've imported React FontAwesome icon from the FontAwesome, and then we have the free brands S icon. And this is FA Twitter, which right there, boom. FA Twitter, and then I go down here, and in the A tag, I have it so it's a FontAwesome icon with the icon set to FA Twitter, and this should work. And look at that. Now let's go ahead and just polish this a little bit and get these so they are set up to be the same height. So I was thinking around for a long time trying to get this figured out, and the styling is really at this point just me trying to figure this stuff out. What I ended up doing was I ended up having to wrap these buttons. I was pretty happy with getting this to display. I added the quote block the same way that I did with the Twitter icon, and then I needed to get these buttons to be the same size. So I ended up wrapping things in a button wrapper. So you can see that both these buttons are wrapped in this div right here. This div contains both this A tag and this button tag for our tweet quotes and our new quotes. And then if I go to the styling here, I have display flex with justify content space between. And then I set a min height to 50 pixels. So this button takes up the full available height. It doesn't shrink down. You can see what happens if I toggle that off. See how it shrinks that down just a little bit, and then if I do that, this button is smaller than that, so that min height sets it so that button will take up the full available space. Display flex, this is for the tweet quote. Display flex allows me to get the tweet icon in the center. You can see that it takes up a little bit more if I want it to be slightly smaller. And then I give it padding of 10 pixels, so there's some space around the tweet. And then align self center and justify content center. Made sure that Twitter icon was smack dab centered. then finally made sure that the new quote had the same border radius, gave it some padding as well, and then the cursor was pointer and the font size was 16, so slightly larger. Ultimately, it was as simple as that, but it took me a while and a lot of trial and error to get that figured out. And I will say that I'm still struggling with how to actually get styling to work. So let me walk you through at least my current workflow, because most of this is me just dinking around and trying to figure out what's going on. So what I do is I click on inspect element, and then I click on this, and then I can toggle these and I can add individual element styles in the Chrome developer tools. So let's say, oh, I think that font's too small. If I click inspect on this, I go here and I look for the font color, font size. I don't see any, so let me go ahead and add font size, and let's go ahead and do 10 pixels, and that's too small. And now what I can do is I can use the arrow keys to increase that until I'm happy with it. So 16 looks just about right to me. So what I can do is I can go down to my new quote button. I can then add that style in. Font size is 16 pixels, which actually I believe is 1 rem. And then notice that when I refresh the page, it looks the exact same, because now that font size is actually an embedded style. That's the best that I found for being able to work on the CSS. Most of the time, it is just looking up the properties, looking up the guides on it, and filling it in. If anyone has better resources on CSS or a better method to do it than this, I would love to hear it, because this is the best that I found so far. But you can still see that I have problems, like I don't want this button to be so small. I'd love it if I can get them to flow to new lines. And I know I could do that through a media query, which I do through you do that through an I believe it's at media. So it's at media. And this is one where I just look it up right away, because I can never remember the syntax for it. So I do. So I just look this up. I type in media query CSS, and I go to, it's always W3 schools. Just copy this example over right here. Media query, so it's 600 pixels, so I could decide when I want it to flow. At a certain point, I want it to flow, so generate random text, generate the random quote takes the full width, and then the Twitter button takes the full width below it. So I could have this be where I have the, so this button's display flex. What I do is I change the flex direction from row, which is its default, to column. So if I do dot buttons, I change this flex direction to column. Now it might not work right away, but hey, there we go. And actually I want it to be column reverse, because I want the tweet button below it. There we go. Simple as that. And then I'll also add a little bit of padding, we'll do a we'll add a little bit of margin bottom to the new quote. So new quote, margin bottom, we'll add 10 pixels, just so there's a little bit of space. Not terrible, not great, it works, okay? And I think that that's probably a pretty good solution right there. The quote machine right there, it's all working. It passed all the tests. It passed all of our tests. 12 out of 12. Now, and it has the Twitter button, generate random quote. Everything's looking great to me. The only thing that we really need to do at this point is deploy it. So let me show you how to do that. You're gonna need a GitHub account, and you just log in, and then you can create we'll just create a new repository like this. Skill quote machine. Like this. You don't want to initialize it with anything. Just click create repository right here. And we installed, and you can see right here, get init. We already have the README. We already have that. So we can skip these first two commands. What we're going to do is instead we're going to do git add all, and then we're going to do git commit m dash m quote completed React project. And then we can copy in this, git remote add origin. Just copy in whatever it is for you. It's going to be unique. And then all we do is we copy this last one, git push origin master. It's going to just upload all of our files. And I notice I refresh this. Now all of my files are right up here. And now to build this, what we're going to do and deploy it to GitHub Pages, what we need to do is we need to install GitHub Pages. So I already did this. It's going to be npm install gh pages, like that. And then once that's installed, we need to open up our file explorer, go to our package.json, and we're going to add a few things to this. So first we're going to add a home page, and this is going to be, so a home page is going to be your GitHub username right here. And then this is going to be the project name that you gave the repo. So in this case, it's git skill quote machine. And I have my username like that. And now we scroll down, and right here, we need to add 2 lines. This is going to be, so we have pre-deploy. And this is going, and then we also have deploy. And I cannot remember what these are off the top of my head, so let me go ahead and just pages, we just do node, scroll down. We're following this tutorial. We need to add npm run build right here to the pre-deploy. And then for the deploy, we need ghpages-d build. And with that, we are all set. And all we need to do, if you're, make sure it's github.io. I made that mistake at first. You need your username, and it's github.io, not github.com. That's a very important difference. That it took me like an hour to figure that out. And then all you do is you just do npm run deploy. And then it's going to deploy it to this. So the project was built, assuming it's hosted there. And as soon as it gives me saying it's published, there we go. Now if I go here, it might not update right away. Give it a second to load. It's still processing, but it will be posted right here. There we go. And it's all up. Now these tests, you only gotta notice that these tests are gonna fail because all of the IDs and stuff like that got compressed down. So we don't have those IDs anymore. But everything still works the same. And to remove that, let's go ahead and just clean up our project a little bit. And we'll add a little favicon. So all I do for favicons is I just search up whatever image I want or create whatever image. And then I just do PNG to icon converter. Use this convert ico right here. And I just rename it, but you can easily, it's just set right here. If you want to change the favicon so you don't have this as a React app anymore. And then to remove the, let me go ahead and zoom out a little bit. So that way you can actually see what's going on. So you can see that the favicons just set right there. And then we don't need this test suite anymore because we already passed all the tests. So we can just go and delete that. And we want to change the favicon. Let's go ahead and I'll just grab my favicon from my last project, download that. And then I just replace this one. So I don't have to do a single thing. And I don't need these logos anymore either. Like that. And then also I don't need this favicon.png anymore. So there we go. Now we're all set. And then let's go up and finish up the README. And I'll just add demo is available at, and I'll go to my package.json, grab this URL, paste this in, and there we go. Save that. I'm going to do git add all. I just use a period as a shortcut for that. Git commit m cleaned up index added favicon and updated README. And now I'm going to do git push upload set to the cloud. And then if I want to publish those changes to the live website, I just do npm run deploy. And it's going to build that. And then we're going to see it update in a second. Give it a second to update itself. It just published it. It takes a few minutes to update. But you're going to notice that when it updates, this is going to be gone. And also I pull this out, you're going to notice that this little favicon is not going to be the React logo anymore. It's going to be our little quote icon. There we go. And now notice that this changed. There's no test suite anymore. And it also works. Beautiful. So with that, we have completed this, no problems. And you guys just learned how to create a React app from scratch. It's a simple React app, and we didn't really go into components or project or architecture or anything like that. But I want to draw your attention to a few things. First of all, it's a simple function that we have right here. Next, we're just using a simple use effect. We're fetching the quotes like that. We're using a little bit of state right here. We actually do not need this random number anymore, but we were using that to generate a random number. And they were taking that random number, and we were setting that to be a random accent color, set quote, and author to be that random number. And that's how we were doing it. We were just accessing this database. And remember that data, this is JSON data. And we're going into that, we're parsing it, and we're going into it, we're grabbing the quotes, setting the quotes equal to this big array of objects with a quote and author property. And then we're just randomly grabbing a new number each single time that we're doing that. As simple as that. And if we want to tweet it, it's just a simple URL parameter that's parsed out, and it's all set. And with that being said, we just learned how to code an app from scratch as a solo developer with no technical background. It's a pretty cool thing. I hope that you enjoyed it as much as I enjoyed teaching you guys. If you want to see more content like this, please subscribe. This has been Get Skill. Learn how to code an app as a solo developer. And as always, thanks for getting better.